are recording now.
Sounds good. I will call the meeting to order, and we'll start with a roll call. McKee here, Bodema.
Aye.
Nichols.
Here.
Schultz.
Here.
Thomas. Now he's here somewhere.
Yeah.
There we go. Perfect. All right. I will. And do we have a flag anywhere to pop up on the screen? Does anyone?
1 second. Oh, Brad's got one.
Perfect. And I will invite everyone to stand and join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the
to the
flag
flag of the United
States
of America
and to the republic
for
which it stands, one nation,
nation,
under God, indivisible,
indivisible,
with
liberty
and
and
justice
justice
for
for all.
Alrighty. Agenda approval. Brad, do you want to walk through any changes from staff?
Yes, thanks, Mayor and Council. A couple items for you, and we typically have a couple new individuals on the meetings each time, so I'll walk through that as well. Specifically related to the agenda, 2 items we're asking for changes for this evening. The one is under 7C. This is the finance agreement amendment for Napa. We weren't able to get the agreement quite finalized, so we'd like to remove that from this agenda, and we'll place it on a future agenda. And then I emailed the council prior, but Lennar has requested to table item 8A, that is the Tavera Final Plat First Edition, until the April 8th meeting in order to continue work on stormwater and wetland information, so they can finalize that. And we as staff, support that. The more information, the better. So that's requested a table at 8A. And then just a note, there are several public comment opportunities. The first one being at the open forum, that's typically for items not on the agenda. And then also at business items. I will note that on the regular agenda, I did not note a public comment opportunity at planning business, but that would be or should be a public comment opportunity as well, along with unfinished business and new business. So Mayor, that's all I have.
Alrighty.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
I would like to request that we move item 7E to the next meeting, so it's the same time as we're reviewing Tavera, since they are related.
Okay. So table that along with 8A
Yes.
to the next meeting, assuming that's when we're going to be doing it. I did have a question for John, since you're not there, right, on the 8th.
I am not there on the 8th.
How do you feel about that, about doing the Tavera that day?
Thank you for asking, Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Sure.
I would request that you and I have a conversation beforehand.
Okay.
And if I have issues with it, then you can express my concerns at the meeting.
Okay.
Although my vote won't count, the spirit of what I might have to say would have to come through you.
Sounds
And Brad,
good.
there's no
Works for me.
formal way of giving the mayor my vote, is there, at this time?
No.
Okay. Then we'll just have a discussion.
Sounds good. And
Thank
yeah,
you for asking.
Of course. Yeah, it's a big item. I wanted to make sure you didn't feel kind of backed into a corner there with the last minute change. So we'll set something up, and that should be easy enough. But in terms of moving 7E along with that to tabling it to the 8th, does that work for everyone then?
Can you talk to why it's connected? Isn't 7E related to a development that happened some 30 years ago, 20 years ago? How is it connected to the current development?
I believe it's Lennar asking for, or someone asking for it in regards to Tavera to get clear title of that.
It just seems to make sense to me to cover all of that at the same time, so we can have any questions that we have for Paul addressed prior to voting on that request.
I don't feel strongly either way, so.
Could I ask staff could they explain more 7E?
Mr. Mayor, yeah, just a point of clarification, what I would recommend actually is with the agenda approval, removing anything, we can just strike as the agenda approval. I would actually wait till we got to the item itself to have a table action. So when we got to the consent agenda, we could pull item 7E, I think it was, and take a separate action. Similarly, once we get to 8A. So my preference would be to operate in that manner.
Yeah, no, I agree. I was just kind of trying to get on the same page first here, but that works. Okay, so outside of those issues, is there anything that we needed to change today's agenda from council? Hear nothing, I will entertain a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
So moved, Bottom.
Second, Schultz.
We'll call vote. McKee, aye. Bottom.
Aye.
Nichols.
Aye.
Schultz.
Aye.
Thomas. Did he? Manoj.
Aye.
There we go. All right, that carries 5-0. Commission representatives, we have Meredith Wu from the Planning Commission and Tom Anderson from Parks and Trails with us today. So if anything comes up in your guys' purview, feel free to speak up. Next, we have open forum, which, as Brad mentioned, is for anything not on tonight's agenda. And I will hand it over to Jessica to explain how to raise your hand and get called.
Thank you, Mayor. If anyone would like to speak on open forum, you can do so if you are joining us by phone by pressing *9. It'll raise your hand and I can call on you and we can unmute you. Otherwise, if you are on a computer or a device, other type of device, you can click on either the participants tab and then the raise your hand function. On some devices, it's just the raise your hand function on there.
Can I interrupt for just a second and welcome Manoj back and congratulate him on his next child. We're very happy to have you back. We missed you last week.
His next
Happy to be
child,
back. Thank you.
she's got one more coming. Is that what you're saying? Next
I don't
child?
know. It is the next child. They're all healthy, and I think it's worth the public knowing.
Definitely.
Thanks, John.
All righty.
Mayor, time no one's raised their hand. We could give it a moment if you'd like.
Sure, we'll give it a few seconds, and if there's no one, we'll move right on. Okay, we'll move on to presentations and recognitions. And first up, we have Years of Service Award for Clyde Bechtold. And Kevin, I believe, is going to say a few words.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. It is my privilege to congratulate Clyde Bechtold on his 30th year anniversary at the City of Corcoran. And for those of you that did not know, we had a 30-year recognition last year with Pat Meister. So it's quite an honor for me to be able to recognize 230+ year people in this day and age in an organization. And I'm very blessed to have them as part of the team. Clyde has an unquestioned service and dedication to the City of Corcoran. He is extremely reliable. He treats the city's business like it's his own. And he often does his best work in the middle of the night, snow plowing at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning or on holidays. So I know the rest of the team shares and echoes my opinion that we're very fortunate to have him as part of the team. We hope he hangs around as long as he wants to, and even longer post-retirement if we can convince him to keep snow plowing for us, although I think that's unlikely because he wants to move on with his time that's well earned. So he is here tonight. So we're very happy he was able to connect, and I just want to again congratulate you, Clyde. I'm very proud of you, and I look forward to learning more from you as you continue to work with the city. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kevin, and thank you, Clyde, and congratulations. Does anyone else want to say some words?
I'm always appreciative that I can work with people who, I always tell people our town is young enough to work with the people who the roads are named after. And so it's a generation that we appreciate for all you've done historically too, and now in the present. So thank you for your 30 years. It's much appreciated.
Yeah, we appreciate all you do to keep this city running. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
I concur.
All right.
Been a long time.
Well, we're incredibly appreciative of all the hard work you've done for a long time here.
Thank you for acknowledging me.
Of course. You got to go pick up that trophy from Jessica now. It looks pretty cool,
Yeah.
honestly.
It does.
Well, thank
All
you.
right. Thank you.
Thank you, Clive.
All righty. We will move on to 6B, which is a resolution honoring Jeff Dickman, who, as you know, ended his time on the Planning Commission recently. And I'm going to go ahead and read the resolution first, and then we can all say our thank yous to Jeff and go from there. Whereas Jeff Dickman was appointed to the Planning Commission beginning September 13th, 2018, and whereas Jeff Dickman has provided valuable service on the Planning Commission for the City of Corcoran and has elected to end his service following the expiration of his term on February 28th, 2021, and whereas during his service on the Planning Commission, Jeff assisted in reviewing dozens of land use applications, assisted in ordinance updates related to animals, Southeast District design guidelines, development rights program, open space and preservation, park dedication, as well as assisted in adopting the 2040 comprehensive plan. And whereas the City of Corcoran recognizes the time, energy, dedication, and leadership provided by Jeff Dickman. Now therefore be it resolved that the City Council of Corcoran hereby honors Jeff Dickman for his distinguished service on the Planning Commission for the City of Corcoran. And is Jeff on tonight by any chance? I don't think I saw. But well, we can send him the video and send him emails. I've spoken to him not too long ago and told him how thankful I was for his time on the commission. He did a great job, and hopefully he'll stay involved in the city going forward. But if anyone else wants to say a few words, I'll open up.
Yeah, so this is a unique town where the government is sort of weaker than most, and we rely on the people in our town to make things work. And so Jeff stepped forward actually when there weren't that many people interested in doing that particular job. So I'm appreciative of it, and everybody else is appreciative of the 4 years. So thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, I'd echo that. Looking at the date, my memory's probably wrong, Brad, but I think he actually started before then. For some reason, I think his time and my time overlapped on the Planning Commission, where we were on it together, and I would have been off at that point. But neither here nor there. It's a job where we don't pay anything, and people are doing it out of the goodness of their heart to make our city better. So I really appreciate the time and thought process he put in on it.
Absolutely.
I would agree. I first came across Jeff, I think it would have been last July. And he was the planning commissioner who was willing to differ with the city engineer and the county engineer and state his opinion. He was often quiet in meetings, but when he spoke, he had a lot of well thought out arguments and rationale for the position that he was taking. And I remember he challenged a number of us watching, if you feel passionate about this, get involved. And that's part of why I decided to run for city council in the first place. So thank you, Jeff, for your service. Thank you for your hard work and for your inspiration.
I think I have similar thoughts like Jeremy. I think the first time I came across Jeff and his style of operations on the Planning Commission was around when the EBC church, that discussion was going on. In my mind, he was always a silent assassin. He would be quiet in a corner, and when he goes at it, he had everything handy to just go for the kill. So I have always admired his style, and definitely would have liked him to carry on I almost feel like pulling a John on this one and voting nay, but this is not something that we're like, hey, are we allowing him to go? It's not in our power, so I'm going to recognize him, but we'll definitely miss him on that team.
Absolutely. I will go ahead and entertain a motion to approve Resolution 2021-20, honoring outgoing Commissioner Jeff Dickman.
So moved.
Second.
Brad, you can pick who that was. Who got it? Roll call. McKee, aye. Bodema.
Nay.
Nichols.
Aye.
Schultz.
Aye.
Thomas.
Aye.
It's only funny when one or two happens. If we get to three, we're
Yeah, that's what I'm worried about. That's why I didn't go that way.
Okay. Consent agenda, consisting of items 7A through 7E. Is there anything that needed to be pulled? I have a feeling there was the one thing that was discussed earlier. Anything else?
Just 7E.
7A. Okay, then I will entertain a motion to approve consent agenda items 7A through D.
So moved. Second, Bodema.
All right, roll call vote. McKee, aye. Bodema.
You've got to
Aye.
Nichols.
Aye.
Schultz.
Aye.
Thomas.
Aye.
All right, that carries 5-0. So 7E. Brad, do you want to give us a little more background on this?
Actually, if Kendra, I think you're more educated on this item than I am, if that's right with you.
Sure. This request is to, exactly as the mayor said, clear title to the Dempsey property, which is in the final phase of the Tavera project, unrelated to the phase 1 plat. But it is a way for them to have the clear title when they purchase the property from the existing landowner. So it simply acknowledges that the conditions from that 1985 plat have been met.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask a question of Kendra?
Yeah, of course.
So it notes in there that the city attorney has reviewed it and he's making the recommendation. Does approval of this resolution also impact other landowners in that previous development clearing their titles as well?
Yes, it would. If that was in fact clouding a title, that the approving resolution for the plat, and I think that's a question the city attorney and I have, whether in fact that clouds title. But if it did, it would affect any of the landowners that are in the Meadow Trails subdivision. I think there were 9 lots plus this one.
Okay. Thank you.
So Jeremy, you're the one who specifically wanted to pull it, right? What was your thought on pushing it out with the rest of the Tavera?
It just seems like something we'd want to address at the same time as we're doing the Tavera approval. I have very little, if any, reason to doubt we would end up approving it.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like it would make sense from economy's perspective to be able to talk to Paul about it in the context of what they need on Tavera itself. So I thought it would make sense to discuss them all together and approve them at the same time.
I guess,
That,
Mr. Mayor, my opinion would be if it affects other property owners not related to the Tavera project, other owners in that original subdivision who may be looking at title search for a sale or whatever, I'd be all for pushing it forward now, since it doesn't impact our decision really on the final PUD and plot of Tavera.
okay. Well, it sounds like, Kendra, there may be some question to whether that is actually causing an issue with the title.
Well, I mean, neither John or I are specifically title attorneys. I've had other attorneys recently want to have similar items removed, so to speak, or acknowledge that they've been met. So I think title companies maybe are getting a little more involved. So
Gotcha.
this is the first request I've had at any city, though, to bring it to a council to do this, but it doesn't, the city doesn't lose anything by approving it. The conditions of Meadow Trail have been met back in the 80s. So there's no, in the city attorney's opinion, there's no, nothing the city loses by acknowledging that those conditions have been met.
Why couldn't this have been administratively approved?
They requested that it come through the council as a formal resolution that could be recorded. The applicant did. I don't think there's any reason it couldn't have been a letter from staff acknowledging that, but the Lennar specifically asked it be a council resolution. And we had no objection.
Gotcha. Well, I think if it's in reality only Lennar who's bringing the issue up, then it makes sense to put it with the rest of Tavera that we're going to for sure be talking to them about at likely the April 8th meeting.
There are a number of things that I hope to discuss with Paul, and I think this would be helpful to have as an additional item to follow when we complete those discussions.
Okay. Okay, so do we want to, someone want to take a crack at a motion to table 7, excuse me, I got misplaced my thing. What is it? 7E to the April 8th City Council meeting?
So moved, Nichols.
Second, Thomas.
All right, roll call vote. McKee, aye. Bottoма?
Abstain.
Nichols?
Aye.
Schultz?
Nay.
Thomas?
Aye.
All right, that will be tabled. Carries 3-1-1. So that takes care of everything from consent agenda. Planning business. First off, we have another public comment opportunity for the items here. Although, Brad, how are we? I guess people are still welcome to speak on it. We've clearly already talked a bit about potentially moving this Tavera item out to the April 8th meeting, but we'll still open it up here for people to speak if they'd like to. Just try to keep in mind, if you don't mind, that we will likely be discussing it at that meeting.
So would you like Jessica to go through the comment period information?
Oh, sure,
Okay.
that'd be great.
Yes. So if anyone wants to raise their hand, they can do so by pressing *9 on your phone. If you're joining us by phone, otherwise click on the participants button and then raise your hand if you're joining us by electronic device. Mayor, at this time, no one's raised their hand yet.
Okay. Give it a second. Not seeing anyone either. Okay. So we'll go on to 8A, which is the final plat and final planned unit development plan for Tavera. And Kendra, I will hand it off to you here. And I'm not sure, do you still want to present on the kind of the situation and then we'll discuss that, or how do you want to handle this?
Well, Mr. Mayor, that's up to you. I think the applicant requested, as Brad said, that the item be tabled because they recently received some feedback from the watershed, and they have a meeting scheduled with city staff on Friday to discuss that. So they wanted the opportunity to try to address any outstanding issues that they could. And as Brad said, we support the idea of getting more information and bringing it back on the 8th.
Sounds good. And John and I, we already spoke about you and I talking prior to that meeting. Does anyone else have an issue with tabling it to the April 8th meeting?
Mr. Mayor, I'm okay with tabling it, but I would like to take a few minutes just to apprise staff and the public of a few concerns that I have about the development. That's okay?
Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
So Lennar's got a long history, well, semi-long history in Corcoran with developing the Ravinia neighborhood. I've had feedback from a number of residents in that neighborhood that I would like to express publicly so that Lennar can take account of them as they prepare for Tavera and how Tavera would be administered as they begin their development there. One issue that's arisen in Ravinia among a number of residents who have complained have been construction materials and debris that's been left in their yards after closing, or left in public spaces, or not secured during construction where it blows into wetlands or off of the property. I would like to see an improvement in that behavior in Ravinia and in subsequent developments that Lennar decides to pursue in Corcoran. Secondly, a number of residents last year went through closing and didn't have sod installed in their properties beyond the 30 days that is allowed in ordinance. Thirdly, a number of issues have come up with residents and their surveys. So in a couple of weeks, we're going to hear from the Cromingas on a variance application where they purchased a property in Ravinia. I've got a copy of the survey that they received from Lennar that doesn't show any setbacks. So they were unaware that they wouldn't be able to build a deck on the back of their property. The house actually was designed and authorized to have a deck door on the second story to make it implied that they would be able to put on a deck in that location. And in the end, it is not permitted per code, and they have to get a variance, which was costing them several $1,000s to proceed with. Another resident complained that corner markers were placed inaccurately in his yard, so the monuments led to sod being laid in incorrect locations and a fence being put up incorrectly, which then he had to pay another $1,400 to have the fence relocated to align with the true property line. Fourth issue, maintenance of trees in the neighborhood hasn't been consistent. So for example, all 7 trees planted in Wildflower Park have completely or mostly died. The HOA company that Lennar has selected for administering the HOA has had a number of issues that residents have complained about. So there's a number of things that I think we can address. It seems as though this is something that Lennar would want to resolve, and I'm sure that they will. But we just need to make sure that we express this as a concern of the residents and a concern of the city, that we make sure that as we're developing in a responsible way that respects the landowners who are part of the city and who join the city as a result of that development.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeremy. Those are definitely all good things to keep in mind in general, and I'm sure plenty to discuss with Lennar at a later time.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
I want to just interject. I want to understand the scope of the city versus civil disagreements between the builder and specific landowners. As much sympathy as I might have for that situation, I want to engage Brad and Kendra and Mr. Thames into how much does the city extend into a civil disagreements between a HOA and a builder as to the maintenance of the trees, only because I want to know specifically whether or not we have laws in the books that pertain to any of that. I do not want to get involved with a disagreement between a builder and a buyer of a property where the builder didn't disclose that they couldn't put a deck on. You can imagine how much involvement we'd have in any dispute between a builder and a buyer. I want to know the extent of that. And I also would want to know, like, also if a builder has a bunch of these issues, how much a city can do, because I also want the builders to be nice to the people that are in our community. Can you speak about the extent of that, where our limitations lie? We've had issues with builder disagreements with landowners, adjacent landowners, existing landowners, purchasers. We have a new development coming in. How do we lay that out? What do we need to think about?
John, may I interject first?
I'm not in charge.
Yes, go ahead.
So I don't see a role for the city in adjudicating disputes between private owners. I think what I was intending to draw attention to was this is a potential issue, and there might be things that we can put into the resolution that could prevent it. So for example, when it comes to the surveys, if they're not clearly showing setbacks, perhaps there could be a condition that surveys need to show setback markers in ways that are obvious. simple things like that could avoid that kind of issue going forward.
But, well, Mr. Mayor, can I ask a question of?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So like, if that were true, wouldn't that be a civil issue between the builder and the landowner? Why do we need to get involved? I'm only asking on behalf of the 6,000 people in Corcoran who don't want to spend the city money in an issue that we have no actual legal authority or purview on.
Can you explain what you mean by city money?
Because there's no code involved there. That's just a disagreement between a homeowner and a builder for non-disclosure of an existing city law. It's our law. Once we get involved with something that is not that is outside of our purview, then all of a sudden we're responsible for the outcome and we spend resources on it. I think I just want to be clear on where our legal purview ends and where it becomes an issue between somebody who purchased a house and a lot from a builder, and if the builder deceived them in some way or told them in some way they could have something they can't. I don't want to get involved. That's not the city's purview.
I think you're misunderstanding, John. So I think I clearly
Or maybe
said,
you could be explaining it wrong.
I think I clearly said I don't see a role for the city involved in a specific dispute. I suggested that we try to find ways in how we set the conditions for the next development to preempt the kinds of issues that we're seeing.
Well, we
Mr.
lay
Mayor?
down the rules.
Correct.
And it's up to the builder to decide that. And I think the rules are clearly laid out. And I'm asking for specifics on how we prevent that. And I'm okay with specifics on how we prevent that as a law. Every situation you laid out was an issue between a builder and a buyer.
Mr.
And
Mayor,
I want to just make
Yeah,
sure,
go ahead,
because
Brad.
we can't spend all day disputing builder-buyer resolutions.
Go ahead, Brad.
yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. And I'll just really jump in because I probably have more color than anybody here. Councilmember Nichols was kind enough to send the information he was referring to a day or so ago. And a lot of it is within the city's purview, actually with either codes we currently have or just with working with the developer as construction takes place. And I think what might be best is I appreciate Councilmember Nichols bringing it up. And we at the staff level have a little more flavor to it. And when we bring the council report back on April 8th, maybe we can do a little blurb on each of the items that Councilmember Nichols talked about. Maybe be more clear, because again, we have more information. I think Councilmember Nichols want to be pretty crisp and clear tonight. We can provide more context to it, but I think there's quite a bit of it is within our purview. Some is not, and some will recommend not making any changes to. Just a preview on that. But we can give a paragraph to it in the report, and I can follow up with you, Councilmember Bottom, if you want to.
Perfect.
Yeah, I don't want to, it's not a personal thing between Jeremy. For 5 years, Jeremy, before you came on council, we were expected to stand in between homeowners and builders, and we would get asked to intercede on one of their behalf. And it's a tremendous drain on city resources when it's outside of purview. And if Brad can articulate our purview, then I think we'll very much be on the same page.
Very good.
Perfect. That'll be great. Okay, so regarding actually tabling it, I'll entertain a motion to table 8A, the final plat and final plan unit development plan for Tavera to the April 8th city council meeting.
So moved, Nichols.
Bottom a second.
Mr. Do we even have to vote on tabling it if the applicant requested it be pulled, and didn't we amend the agenda to not have the item?
I'll defer to Brad on that. Do we?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. No, we did not technically amend the agenda to table this. That's
Okay.
because of me. I recommended waiting till the item, and we do recommend motion and vote to table.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Okay, so we did have a second, right? I
I
didn't get who
did.
that was. Okay.
Yes.
Perfect.
I beat
Ben
Manoj.
Perfect. Roll call. McKee, aye. Bodema,
Aye.
Nichols,
Aye.
Schultz,
Aye.
Thomas.
I have a question. I'm sorry this is coming in late. I just flipped the deadline for the 60-day as March 30th. Man, looking at the right one, right? So what happens when does this come back? Does it get auto-approved? Like what happens? I thought we have to
Yeah, thanks, Mayor and Council, and Kendra can jump in. I emailed this to you, I apologize, but there is a 60-day extension that's been initiated, so we're not up against that.
yeah.
Alrighty.
Manoj,
Ben?
it is okay to ask questions all the way up to your final vote.
Okay, I was like, I seconded this. And I saw the
That's
data.
yes.
Yeah, preferably a little before.
Well,
right.
it might be
I
wise
only to
to,
vote once, though.
it might be wise to have a refresher on Robert's rules, because my understanding was we would take a motion, a second, and then have discussion and then a vote. Because to Jeremy's point, if Manoj raises a question, there's no way you can change your vote.
Okay, my mistake. I
Yeah.
wasn't intentional to leave the gap, but I will.
No, that's fine. I'm
be aware of it.
surprised John didn't pull out his.
I know.
rules.
I've got the book. I've got the 3-part handout, and I got the CD. If anybody wants Robert's rules. It was going to be a Christmas gift for you new guys, but I didn't want to violate any laws.
Oh, before the first, probably could have. Okay, let's see here. So we are on to 8B, which is a public hearing for the easement vacation for Fane Meadows. Kendra.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jess has a slideshow, a brief slideshow, just to highlight what we're asking for. It is an easement vacation for Fane Meadows up on the north side of the city off of County Road 117. The image on the screen outlines in yellow the property south of 117, and this is west of Kane Road. And it is Outlot A of Fane Meadows. The highlighted pink areas are drainage easements that exist. And they would be vacated, and this applicant is in process of creating a wetland bank. And so they will provide new larger easements over the site to accommodate the wetland bank. We have a drainage corridor highlighted on this map on the west side of the property and a floodplain on the south side of the property that the city will want to maintain easement rights for, as well as the state of Minnesota. So next slide. Compares the existing easements on the left. Those hash marks are the existing easements the city acquired as part of the plat. Those would be vacated. And then the right image, the hash marks, show the new easement that will be provided by the applicant. Because this is a wetland bank with the state of Minnesota, the bank goes to the state or through Bowser, the Board of Water and Soil Resources. And the city has included a condition that would ensure that we retain rights through a separate easement to maintain that floodplain or ditch area identified previously. So again, on the left, the easements that we're vacating, and we're getting larger easements under a state conservation easement as shown on the right. Next slide. And so we do recommend that you move to adopt resolution 21-24 vacating the drainage utility easement contingent upon dedication of that new easement to Bowser and a condition that they provide city easement maintenance rights for the ditch and floodplain. Now, Brad did email out to the council. We received 2 comments from one from the city of Rogers and one from the resident to the east. Primarily with questions, and Kevin Mattson has, I believe, spoken to both of those folks. And so again, we do recommend approval of the resolution vacating the drainage and utility easement after the public hearing is closed.
Sounds good. And I'm sorry, I missed a bit there. It cut out. You said someone had there was a couple emails that was sent in that were going to be addressed.
Yes, I believe Wednesday, I think, maybe
Oh, okay.
Tuesday. Brad sent out a couple of emails to the council, one from the city of Rogers and one from the resident to the east.
Gotcha. Thank you. Okay, then if we still have no one raising their hand to speak, I will go ahead and entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
just a point of clarification. We just need to actually have you physically say the words, open the public hearing to start it.
I'm sorry, I thought I already did. And I will open the public hearing first.
Wonderful. Thank you,
Now-
Mayor. And we do have
Thank you,
two,
Brad.
we do have two people that have raised their hand. First is the name, screen name Sarah. I'm going to go ahead and ask you to unmute. And if you could state your name and address for the record, then great.
Yeah, our names are, can you hear me okay?
Yes,
Yep.
thank you.
Okay, we are Sarah and Michael Larson. Our address is 22880 109th Avenue North. We are directly north of the property that you guys are discussing today.
Perfect. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so our question is, well, a couple of things. We would be interested to hear what the city of Rogers has got to say about the vacation of the easement. Our concern rests really with not wanting water and standing water to continue to back up onto our property. It has been a consistent issue for us for probably, well, we've lived here 7 years. And our concern, and it's not really clear in the drawings as well as the communication of how are we going to prevent that water from not stopping up into our property and continuing to, and we've had trees die, we've had, just constant water. And that's been our major concern. And so far, no one's been able to address that concern with us. So I am completely opposed to approving this until someone can help explain how that's not going to happen.
Okay, thank you, Sarah.
For us and the 3 adjacent.
Yeah, and
properties
it's not
too.
just us. I mean, there's
Right.
several neighbors around us that are experiencing, the same situation, but that is majorly our concern.
Gotcha. Thank you, Sarah. Regarding the letter from Rogers that you mentioned, is that in the packet, Brad?
Mr. Mayor, no, it is not. And
That
maybe
was
what
too
we can do is we're taking notes here. Maybe Kevin, after the public hearing is closed, maybe I can ask Kevin to respond to anything that's brought up, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, that would be great.
Is it, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
Is it possible for Sarah to stay on during the conversation about the, I have some questions for her. Is it possible for Sarah to stay on during the regular discussion, or can I ask her questions today?
Either is fine with me. You want to go ahead?
You questions.
Well, Sarah, this is John. I'm on the Corcoran City Council here. And
Hi.
I was out there on the property today, and I also need clearance from the council because my property is connected. It's the south property of the property in question. So I don't think there's a conflict of interest, but it specifically impacts the property adjacent to mine. If somebody has an issue with that, I can withdraw from the conversation. I don't think there's a conflict of interest, but in an acute situation, I think it's good to ask.
I'm comfortable.
Are you asking me if I think there's a conflict of interest?
No, I'm asking the rest of the council.
Oh, okay.
John,
Conflict of
how-
Not for me, I'm good.
how is your property impacted one way or the other? Can you just elaborate on what the
Well,
scenario would be?
It doesn't. It just touches the property. It doesn't. Potentially there's an issue here that I think Sarah's touching on with respect to, and I had I actually had the federal government, the state government, the county government, and me, the city government, on my property across the creek from this property, and we discussed this matter on yesterday. And it wasn't, we actually were here for a different purpose, but some of the things that I talked about specifically were related to Sarah's issue. So if one of the things that I think we need and have consistently talked about is the impact of things that happen in Corcoran, even though Sarah's in Rogers and her neighbors are in Rogers, I believe we have a responsibility to them, even though technically they're not Corcoran residents. But before I talk about that, I want to get permission from Corcoran, since it's an adjacent property to my own, to have that discussion.
I don't have-
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it either. And I believe Manoj, you said the same.
So Sarah, I'm not sure what you've heard. I can't guess. You've said you have had no responsibility, and thank you for calling. And as far as I'm concerned, anybody that has an opinion about Corcoran issues should call in and be part of the discussion within reason. So I think some of the things that you're talking about are, if they there's a drain tile issue of a specific drain tile that goes into the Corcoran property from the Rogers property. And in the event, and you guys have had flooding issues because that drain tile has been compromised, and you're worried about further compromisation of the existing or new drain tile, and how might that affect your land? Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's a correct statement. Yeah. I have not had any communication. I mean, I know my husband has talked a bit to Mr. Rains about the plan, but there's really been no understanding of how development or removing the existing or the drain tile across the road from us is going to impact our water flow. And, one of the parts of a property's value is the amount of property that you can utilize. And if we go from the 5.5 acres that we have today to, well, now we got 2.5 acres that are dry land, that's going to impact our property values to have a bunch of standing water sitting around. And I mean, I like the idea of having the property across the road from us in an undeveloped wetland area. But not if it impacts our property value. Absolutely not.
Yeah. So let me try to address it from the person on the other side of the creek, where the lowest part of the creek is on my property. And there's the same situation where drain tile is draining other people's property onto my property and then into the creek. So my neighbors are in the same position as you are, because I'm also considering taking out the drain tile on my property, which would have the same impact as the people to the south of me. So in Minnesota, there's a law and a rule that if you ever impact a drain tile and it has impact to adjacent landowners, there are a bunch of statutes that address that impact. And for example, I can't take out the drain tile on my land and have the neighbor's land flood. So if there's a drain tile that goes onto my property, I have to have, if there's an impact, I have to have that drain tile be straight piped to the creek. And I believe your property is in the same situation, where if there's a drain tile, Mr. Rains can't just pull up drain tile. And if there's a drain tile that drains your property and goes to the south and goes into the creek, and he just plugs that's against the rules. That's illegal, as I understand it. And my another understanding is that that drain tile that goes across Mr. Rain's property has been damaged or compromised in some way, and the efficacy or the I guess the reality is that the new drain tile will drain your land better than what's on there today. And I believe that not the city of Corcoran, but the watershed, the state of Minnesota, and I don't know how high it goes, maybe to I don't think it goes to the feds, but it goes to the state to ascertain whether or not the drain tile will impact your property in a negative way. And if the drain tile impacts your property in a negative way, they can't do it. And so what we're addressing as a city of Corcoran is to ascertain whether or not we as a city give up the right for two things. One is to have a ditch along the western side of that property, and that's there in case something plugs up and we can go and dig it out. And the second is the southwest property, which abuts mine. If there's a plug in the creek that floods everybody, not including you, but floods everybody upstream of the creek, the city has the right to go in there. Those are the things on the table for us. We give up, we vacate the right to go into the property to the specific pieces marked on the map. It doesn't directly impact you. However, I believe if I was a landowner, I'd be concerned about the impact on my piece of property, because a flooded 5 acres sucks and a dry 5 acres is awesome. I'm there. I think I'm there with you. And I believe in this case, us vacating the property doesn't impact you, but I also think the project on the table impacts you in a positive way, because they're going to fix the issue, some of the issues that cause drainage on that property and to the north to be impaired or slower than expected. That's my opinion. I don't know if that
I
solves
appreciate
anything for you.
your opinion, but from what I'm hearing, it's an opinion. What I'm asking for is more than an opinion. And if that's the state of Minnesota that needs to come out and explain to us how the change across the road is going to benefit the flow of water off of our property, then I'm happy to have that conversation. What I'm hearing you say, what I also heard you say, is the west bank will be addressed, as well as the southwest or east bank will be addressed, which just honestly, sorry, conveniently butts up against your property. So it appears to me that your concern.
Wait, the
will
West
be
Bank
addressed
doesn't.
with the
The
Mr.
West
Mayor.
Bank
The
actually
west
doesn't.
bank does not. I understand
Mayor.
that the west
Okay.
bank does not.
Mr. Mayor, if I can just jump in here. The
Yep.
purpose of right now is a public hearing, and the
Yep.
specific item under consideration is easements. So it's vacating a smaller set of easements for a larger set of easements. And that is the specific action and the specific item for this public hearing right now. There is no specific project that the council is considering right now. It's purely this
Right.
easement vacation. I'm happy to coordinate with Sarah and follow up on this, but I just want to make sure we stay on topic where the public hearing is for tonight.
Yep. No, I appreciate that, Brad. I should have probably stepped in there earlier, but I do appreciate the detail you were getting into, John, and Sarah. I understand your concerns. Brad, if you could follow up with them, I would definitely appreciate that. It looks like someone else is raising their hand. Let's go on to them, and then.
Yeah, sorry, I apologize. I just have to ask
No.
one more question before you move on from us. So
Go
what
ahead.
I'm hearing is our concern is heard maybe, but doesn't weigh into the decision of what you guys are trying to pass through today. Is that accurate?
I mean, the issue overall that I think you're concerned about isn't part of the decision today. Your concern is certainly part of the conversation and decision regarding any of this, just as anyone's concern is.
So what is the decision on hand today? What is vacating the easement mean?
Brad, do you briefly want to just explain the technical?
If it's okay, Mr. Mayor, what I'd like to do is
Go ahead.
finish with the public hearing, and Kevin can certainly describe anything. Or I guess
Sounds good.
I can right now. It's, Kendra walked through it before we open the public hearing. We can walk through it again after the public hearing if you want.
Let's finish the public hearing. Let's hear from the other person who has their hand up, and then Kevin, if you could explain a little bit of the technical side before we close the public hearing, that'd be great.
Mayor, we do have one other hand up, caller ending in 5206. If you want to go ahead and press *6, you can go ahead and state your name and address for the record. Mayor,
Yep, there we go. Unmuted for a second.
yeah, *6 can mute you, sir or ma'am. Caller number 5206. I'm going to press *6. That can unmute you. There we go.
Yeah.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes. Can we just get your name and address?
Absolutely. My name is Bill Deluge. I'm speaking on behalf of James Colassa, 11055 Tilton Trail South. So we were just listening into what Sarah was saying. I think what could clear this whole thing up is everyone wants to know what you guys are approving tonight, because if it's going to change that whole watershed, it's hard for anyone in this area to believe that we don't have more information on how it impacts the land around it before any decision is made. I think is where the dilemma comes in. The main objective is the tile in there. If they're going to put non-perf in and it's going to be at the same depth it's at, and it drains the water from the north side of into Rogers, let's call it, then I don't think there's a problem with it. But with the information given to the landowners around it, it's awfully vague.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I think that's the real problem here is the fact that these landowners hear about this kind of secondhand, and we're hearing nothing. This packet we got still is clear as mud. And then, like Sarah's bringing up, I think why she's upset is probably because you guys are going to make a decision. Well, I think we just really need to know what the impact of that decision is, and will there be more information that goes out before things actually change?
Okay, and I think we will have Kevin explain some of those technical side of things and hopefully give a better idea of what exactly would be involved with just what's being decided here with the easement vacation. So I will. Do we have anyone else raising their hand, Jessica?
No, Mayor. At this time, no one else is raising their hand.
Okay. Then I will go ahead and entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved. Matt Thomas. Was Joe?
Second.
Good. Perfect. Any further discussion? Roll call vote. McKee, aye. Fatima?
Aye.
Nichols?
Aye.
Schultz?
Aye.
Thomas?
Aye.
Okay. Kevin, could we get you to kind of explain the technical side of things a little bit more for people?
Mr. Mayor, I'll just jump in quickly first. I'll try to recap really quickly what Kendra started with. And then I think, Kevin, what's probably most important, what people want to know is what are the next steps and what information will be put out before any action is taken. So real brief, what Kendra teed up right at the beginning, we're discussing is an existing drainage and utility easement. So this is a DNU or drainage and utility easement the city has access to and we took when there's a previous development. The action tonight would be to vacate or remove that existing drainage and utility easement and put a new, bigger drainage and utility easement on. So the action is regarding vacating an old, smaller easement and eventually putting a new, bigger easement on. and the old one can't go away until the new one's on. So if anything, the action related to this is to enlarge the easement that the city would have access to. So I'll start with that. That is purely the action item. It's not regarding approving a project. It's not regarding allowing somebody to cut tile, to do whatever they want with the property. That is the action tonight. So Kevin, if you could kind of go from there and maybe add any details, that'd be helpful. And I'm more than happy, and will certainly reach out to Sarah and others outside of the meeting. Kevin.
Mayor,
Yes.
I had a request. So while Kevin, while you go through it, one of the things that I would be interested in hearing is with the time difference between us removing the easements and the state coming in and putting their perpetual conservation easement, and then us getting our drainage and utility easements back, right? Are we, by taking this off and doing this, are we enabling them moving forward with the project? And do we need to have more information than enabling that, or is that something that the state and watershed would take care? Like, so if you walk through the steps, that'll be good to know on what we are enabling by taking it off. I do realize we're getting it back in a bigger one, but because of the fact that we're vacating it, are we enabling a project to move forward?
Sure. Thanks, Mayor and Council. I'll try to address the 3 or 4 kind of quick topics that were brought up, and then open that back up to you guys. So really the only reason we're involved in a Bowser wetland bank, and Bowser, the state of Minnesota agency, the only reason the city of Corcoran is even giving an opinion on this at the council is because we have an existing D&U easement that they need to vacate and provide a larger one, like Brad stated. So it's, if this was an unplatted parcel or just typical ag land, we wouldn't even be in this situation. So it's because it was platted previously. We have basically a generic D&U easement over existing wetlands that are, as you can see in the figure, pocket wetlands that don't even necessarily overlap the drain tile. So everything's important, but a really kind of low value D&U easement at this point for us. So that's what we're being asked to consider vacating. A goal of this, there was one comment about what Roger's statement was in the letter. Roger's statement in the letter was simply, please evaluate or make sure there's no existing drainages impacted. So the city of Corcoran staff, and I believe council, would share the same statement. The state of Minnesota, through the Bowser program, that's a requirement of the plan, is to not impact any adjacent properties. So all of those align. So there's engineers at Bowser that review the plan. There's Wetland Conservation Act folks through the LGU process, and TEPS, which is a multifaceted agencies all looking at it. Wetland banks are extremely strict and hard to actually get credit for. It's a long process, as the applicant could speak to if he wants to, if that's part of your decision making. But it's a highly scrutinized process that looks extensively at impacts. We're not doing that review. That's for others to do. Again, we're focused strictly on this easement vacation. So when it's presented to us, what do we say? Those are our same immediate concerns. Well, this is kind of a drainage confluence. Properties to the west and north and east all drain through this corridor. That's why we're recommending a contingent approval, to make sure we understand that how it's going to be maintained and handled in the future. So we are going to go back to the applicant and say, we're open to vacating these as long as we understand how this drainage gets maintained in the future. And so we're only recommending a contingent approval, which allows the applicant and the city and the state to have a conversation about how we understand and clarify drainage responsibilities after the bank's in place. Bowser, the state agency, takes over that larger easement typically, and they're very strict with it. We're basically requesting that we understand and take kind of a, I guess, subrogated, if that's the correct word. I might have that incorrect, but basically we have some say as well in that. So we have some say that any party that currently drains through there would have, in a worst case scenario, an ability for us to go in there and correct it. we don't want to be the primary person with that responsibility. To Councilmember Bottom's statement, and he did a really good job stating what I believe are very close to what I would have stated. But we want to go in there in emergency situations if there's a problem. But should this bank go through, and we're not approving the bank tonight, Bowser approves the bank. Should it go through and we ultimately vacate the easements and find a way to, be underneath the easement so we have some authority to get in there, that's, I think, a win for everyone. And so we as staff feel there's no reason to not allow the applicant to have a conversation between us and the state and how this might work. If the language can't be, there can't be an agreement between all parties that something works, then we just don't vacate the original easement because it's a contingent easement. Does that kind of answer the question of what we're doing today?
Yes, that I appreciate it. That was a lot of important information there. Does that answer everyone else's questions about this on the council?
I have
Quick
a
question, Kevin.
Jeremy, let's go first and then go to you, to Manoj.
So Kevin, this is more of an informational question. With a wetland bank system, would they be actually increasing the amount of wetland on the property, or just taking credit for the wetland that's already present and promising to preserve it?
It can be any combination, but it's usually it's usually a combination of that. And in this case, it's a combination. So they are basically proposing to take the tile that's free draining from Rogers and rerouting it around any of the water that they're backing up. So the existing condition, as I understand, it's free draining at the end of the pipe, and it will be free draining post. Again, we're not really reviewing that, but that's something that Bowser looks at. So, we look at that too on the side to make sure we don't have any objections. So in this case, yes, this is going to be a wetland in perpetuity, and it could also be not all wetland. There's also buffer credit, so it could be a natural upland area they get a little less credit for. So it's really designed to be a habitat amenity in perpetuity. The landowner is committing to locking this up for a credit that he can then sell. So they're common in Minnesota. They're really hard to get, and extensive scrutiny is undertaken to make sure everyone thinks it's okay.
Excellent. Thank you, Kevin.
Manoj?
Yeah, Kevin, you said contingent approval, right? And then the vacation, would it come back to the council, or if they meet, like how does that work? Like how does this become, yep, it's past contingent now and we've approved it and we vacated the current easements we have?
Yeah, good question. And Kendra might have to jump in. The way we have it recommended is that you would approve it contingent, staff and our attorney, finding it to be acceptable, an acceptable means of access and coverage. So I don't know if Kendra can talk about alternatives that may exist, but staff is recommending that, you, I guess, lay the trust in staff and our attorney to make sure that we meet what we committed to in the contingency.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah,
if I may ask Kevin,
go ahead.
so thank you for explaining the wetland bank. That was my same question Jeremy had, that there'd be an additional wetland. So we approved plot on this piece of property before where we obtained the easements, correct? And there was homes, and currently what they're showing is wetland, or to be wetland bank area. They actually showed upland land in some of that area as well. So by us vacating the easement, we're basically terminating our approval to the previous plot, and they would have to bring forth a new plot for any future development. Is that also true?
Yes, so these easements we're considering are for a previous, I guess Fane Meadows first, I believe, and Kendra can correct me if I'm wrong. So this was done several years ago, before my time, I believe. So probably 3+ years ago. So these are older easements. More recently, in the past year or so, We did do an OS&P preliminary plat approval that had kind of designated new DNU easements associated with that development. That development never really progressed to final plat. So we're really vacating the original wetland DNU from the first edition, not the second. If I mess that up, I can retry. But and then I believe, to answer your question, is if this bank were to get approved and this easement goes in place, that supersedes everything, and that development that has preliminary plat outstanding would not be any longer, able to move forward. They'd be giving up that rights to that plat for this wetland bank.
Okay. And then you mentioned that any free flowing water through the property would continue to free flow.
Yeah. I guess basically it's, what the term is, they evaluate the existing flows and the proposed flows, just like any other development, and there can't be any offsite impacts. So they can't, bounce the water in Rogers 6 inches on that property. They can't do that. Now, this development goes forward, and 2 years from now, there's a complaint that the water bounces 6 inches. Well, something might have failed, and then that's remedied like any other situation where there's failed tile between two property owners. The state's involved because they're managing the wetland. Again, I think this only helps clarify responsibilities and adds layers of protection to make sure it drains properly. There's more players involved when this gets, implemented. The state of Minnesota is basically running this bank. That's another layer of protection for anyone that drains through it, in my opinion.
But if they can't impede the water that flows through, are they basically holding the water that would naturally fall on that piece of property in a larger wetland area? Is that what they're basically doing, and then selling that larger area as credit?
They're basically trying to restore it back to the way it was previously. So it's a little bit of a complicated scenario, and it probably varies a little bit. So I don't know if it's as simple as you stated it, but in general, they have a responsibility to make sure they're passing through the water from Rogers, from the neighbor to the west, from the neighbor to the east, as they do today.
Alan,
In this case, I believe.
The gist of it is exactly what you said. What they're trying to do is have the water sustain the same flow, but sit in an area that it will be filtered and the water will be cleaner as it enters Rush Creek than it does today, because it'll spend some time in a pond, a holding pond, that will alleviate of some of the things that pollute. So the input is the same, the output is the same. It sits and it gets cleaned. That's what they're trying to do. Sorry, Kevin.
No, that's fine. I mean, one question I would have, and I know that's not really part of this discussion, but it came up when we approved that OS&P preliminary plot, as the home that sits in the middle of that property is a different property owner. And this makes it look like the wetland bank basically borders all the way around their property. I don't know the topography of the land, but I'm hoping to God we don't have to put sandbags around their house to make sure the wetland bank stays there.
Yeah, and that's a good point, and that's addressed in their plan. Again, it's not what we're deciding today, but that is what Bowser looks at. And again, I want to remind you, Bowser's responsibility is to make sure that this design, when they approve it, does not impact other properties. And that is a property. So I know, for instance, in that case, I know the applicant has an agreement in place to address that issue you just brought up, Councilmember Schultz. So they have plans in place that get approved through Bowser to address those types of scenarios.
So is the city's discretion if we leave it to staff right up to the point to where Bowser approves? Could we effectively have final say?
Kendra, do you want to jump in on how that works? I mean, I think that's, I don't know what options we have.
Yeah, I would say we do have final say. So again,
okay,
it's just a drawing on papers in front of us tonight. Is this?
Yeah.
It's not making improvements. But what we've included as conditions is we don't release the vacation to file until we get rights to continue to access the 2 areas I talked about, and we have the new easement in hand. So we have those 3 documents that they're required to file together. So without us getting the rights that we need to have as a city and getting the new easement in place that Bowser approves, we will not release our easements. So that's our control, is we will not give them this resolution that you're going to adopt, that we're asking you to adopt tonight, unless they do those 2 things.
Yeah, and to be clear, any of our actions, even the approval of their final agreement, we're not approving any water flow changes or any kind like that. So the city's decision is totally independent of any future decision that would affect water flow. Is that right? Fair to say?
Yeah, we're not approving the pipe. We're not approving the plan. We're just vacating the easement and asking to have the rights to be underneath the new easement.
Okay.
And we need to, and a lot of times Bowser, doesn't like that because they want complete control, and we're asking to find a way to go underneath them. And so if they can't do it, then we don't release our easement and it goes away. So we have to find a compromise or else it goes away. The applicant is saying, Bowser won't have a conversation with me. We basically need to say, we're willing to entertain this if you meet our stipulations, right?
Right.
Or else it just dies. Or we can just deny this and it will die, fade away because they won't give them the bank if we don't vacate it. So this decision tonight allows us to continue the conversation to find a solution that works for all parties in staff's opinion. And
Right.
that's why we recommend the contingent release, so we can continue those conversations.
And even if we didn't release the easement, it has no impact on water flow.
Yeah, our current rights there have nothing to do with the tile or
Okay.
backing up anything. So it's
Yep.
really a technical kind of
Right.
process. Like I said at the beginning, if we didn't have those easements in there, Bowser would prove the wetland bank through WACA and the TEP and all that without ever coming to council. So
Yeah.
the only reason it's in front of you is because we have this technical component that where they want to kind of clear the easement, and we're going to say, well, we're okay, but we still want to retain some rights. We got to find
Right.
language that works for them and us, we believe there's a route to be able to do that. If we didn't think there was a route, we would just say deny.
Yeah. No,
but
I think
there is a route.
I think it's just important for the listeners to know that any decision we make tonight is not going to change the water on their property. So thank you for that.
If I can clarify
Kevin-
that just for a second, I have a half a mile on the opposite side of that creek. So for example, if they allow more water into the creek, my land will be flooded. If they allow less water into that creek, my land will be dry. If they allow the same, it will be the same. So if Sarah and I are in the exact same boat where neither of us want the water to be changed, I'd be pissed if all of a sudden I had acres of land flooded because they allowed more.
Yeah, but
Now,
our
also
vote, John, is right. It doesn't impact that at all. Ours is just whether we have access to for the easement of the current wetland. Right
No,
now.
I know, but we could,
Yeah.
in theory, we could put up a roadblock, whatever. But I'm just saying, like,
Yeah.
this is where me as a council and a landowner adjacent, like, I'm impacted a lot by this deal.
Yeah.
This vote is not, it doesn't have anything to do with my specific concerns. But if I raised a fuss about it and it was legit, I would be levering as a citizen everything I could do to say, slow this process down because my land's going to get flooded or my land's going to get dried or whatever. I've investigated it a lot. Doesn't impact me.
Thank you.
And Kevin, the mayor can have a clarification. Okay. So Kevin, I think I understand what's going on here. And normally the city would have not got involved, but we are in one of those once in a year scenario where we do have the right to say, if I don't vacate, there's no bank, nothing changes. If I do vacate, it goes by what it would normally be. Like if I was not involved, browser does all the work, and the state to make sure that they don't impact the neighboring properties. Is that a fair statement? Like I'm at a position to stop this project if I want to, but I don't have to because there are checks and balances in place to prevent it from impacting the neighbors.
Yeah, I believe your statement is correct. I'll try to recap because I'm not getting the best reception, but I believe we have the right to not vacate the easements, which would likely result in the wetland bank not being approved on a technicality that they don't have control over it. I don't know. Bowser would have that ultimate decision because they're the king in wetland banks. But I believe if we denied it, my understanding is that the bank might not go forward. So based on that, you have some control over the success of the project. But we are not reviewing any of the hydraulics, any of that. All we're doing is ensuring we have a clear picture than we have today. What we're asking tonight with the recommendation is we want to establish a clear picture of basically authority, for lack of a better word, in this corridor than there exists today. And normally we want to stay out of these things, but we're in them because of the situation we're in, being asked to vacate an easement. So Bowser controls the design. They don't want us to look at the design. They're the king of wetland banks, and it's an extensive process. The applicants here, I think it's been 2 or 3 years they've been trying to get this bank. It's extensive. So all we're really doing is providing an opportunity to find a solution that may work. Again, we're not signing the line here. I think we're making a very reasonable ask that we understand and clarity of not only the existing drainage, but then who's actually able to take care of it in the future. So I think we're actually supplementing the current situation with another layer of future maintenance. So that's why we support moving forward to try to make it work for not only every landowner that drains through here, but the property owner to have the right to consider what they want to do with their land. So
I see Chris Rains has his hand up. Is he the applicant?
Yes.
Can we get him unmuted if he has
Yeah.
something to add?
Chris, I've gone ahead and asked to unmute.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Perfect. Sure, I can try and address some of those questions for you. The landowners to the north, their problem, to my knowledge, I purchased the property, I think 4 or 5 years ago, I can't remember, and water started backing up, but at the time, nobody knew why or where it was coming from. And the following year, we realized that water started bubbling up on our soil, and it was a broken drain tile. That drain tile is hand dug. It's just 12-inch pieces of 6-inch clay pipe that was put in the 1930s usually. And it's distributed through that property and dumps into a channel that was dug probably in the 1950s to drain the site. So we fixed that, and then water started backing up again. And because the tile is old, it's starting to fail. So as that happened, we were going through our development to do the 14-lot subdivision. And when that happened, we started to realize that the site would make a perfect bank because in 1855, that area was actually a lake. And so that's how this process started. And so we've been working with the Army Corps of Engineers for the last 4 years, and they just approved the design in January. As part of that design, the easiest way to explain a wetland bank and the water drainage is probably if you picture a normal city street, when it rains and the water comes off the houses, it goes down your driveway, hits the road, funnels down the curb, and that's that area that as you're looking at the driveway and the street, that is essentially the soil. You see the water piling up on the soil, but as that water hits the storm sewer, it drops underground and you never see it again until you're at a holding pond. That's essentially what is happening on this site. There will be water impacted on top of the soil, but the water that comes from the northern portion of Rogers is actually going through a brand new pipe that's larger than the current pipe, and it's solid, not clay, it's a PVC, and that will be rerouted into the main large basin. And my neighbor, the flag lot in the center, he will be impacted. And he and I have an agreement. He actually wants the wetland just because he'd rather have that than 14 homes around his house. And so he realized that that would impact his soil. So we will actually be raising some of his soil up at the end of his yard so that it doesn't impact water. And then we have a 30-foot buffer around his property in addition to that, so that he doesn't have to worry about any water into the future. But as part of the Army Corps project, they will not allow us to impact anybody around us, including that flag lot in the middle, which is why he had to be on board and be part of that process. But the people to the north, the reason they kept having water back up was because the drain tile is actually failing. So if this project doesn't go through, something will have to be done. The only option really at that point is to do the 14 lot subdivision and then reroute all of the new drain tile and the new storm sewer to drain that. So essentially, if we do a 14 lot subdivision, we'll hook up a new drainage pipe that drains the people to the north. And if we do this wetland bank, we still have to do the exact same thing, which is hook up a new drainage pipe that's larger and drain it to the south. The difference between the development and the wetland bank is that all of the water that comes onto our site with the bank will stay on the site and filter through a larger wetland area. And it will take days rather than minutes for the water to go back into Rush Creek. So we'll be filtering the water going into Rush Creek, but it doesn't slow the water from Rogers. It actually will probably increase speed because I've seen that pipe fill up in the spring or during rains, and so much water comes out of that pipe that it actually encompasses the entire 6-inch diameter of the clay pipe. So there's actually no more room for even water to come through that pipe, and we'll be going to a larger 8-inch tile. So if you have questions, I'll take them, but I hope that explains it a little bit better.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. That does. It sounds to me like there are sufficient, there's quite a few checks and steps that have to be adequately met before anything could happen. So I think that is more than I've seen in the past, and I'm comfortable with that aspect of it. But I'll open it up to the council if anyone else has a thought on that or where they are on this before we, or if someone wants to take a crack at a motion.
I think staff explained it pretty well. I'm comfortable with it as well, and I'll make a motion to approve the easement vacation.
I'll second it. All right, roll call vote. McKee, aye. Bodema,
Aye.
Nichols,
Aye.
Schultz,
Aye.
Thomas.
Aye.
All righty, and thank you everyone for the lengthy discussion. And Brad, if we could make sure to follow up with the few residents that did reach out, that would be a big help. Oops, and my screen just went blank here. But okay. Unfinished business. We have another public comment opportunity. So Jessica, if you could run through that again.
Oh, wonderful. Thanks, Mayor. If you are interested in commenting under new business, we do have, you can press *9 or click the raise your hand button under the participants tab or the functions tab, depending on what type of device you are on. And we'll go ahead, if you could state your name and address, and we can take your comment. Mayor, at this time, no one is raising their hand.
Okay. Then we will go on to the, let's see, 9A Northeast Corcoran Water Supply Planning, and Kevin, because you haven't had the chance to speak up enough in the last few minutes, Kevin. Sorry.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Bringing back kind of some supplemental information related to water supply planning in Northeast Corcoran. At the February 11th, on February 11th, Council held a work session related to basically the draft feasibility report for water supply, treatment tower, and well in Northeast Corcoran. An outcome of that was, kind of some conversation related to some additional analysis potentially related to treatment alternatives, traditional iron and manganese, or do we bump it up and look at softening or nanofiltration? Storage was a topic of conversation. We wanted to maybe evaluate a tower versus underground storage tanks. Controls kind of related to just protection of the system and safety and security, how that gets managed, and then a little bit of conversation on wells that that the staff also kind of brought back as we thought about this a little further. And so what we're bringing for you tonight is in the packet is kind of a menu of tasks that would kind of supplement the conversation. So what we did, we worked with the engineering team and we said, well, what did you hear? What makes sense? Kind of lay it out, different options, different prices, and kind of made a recommendation for you and for discussion purposes. So with that, I will turn it over to Kent Torvey, our city engineer, and he'll walk through some of those tasks fairly briefly. And then he'll pass back to me and then we can have conversation if that works. Kent, you can take it away.
Thanks, Kevin. Good evening, Mayor and Council. As Kevin said, we had 4 categories of what we heard for questions. And the answers to these can vary quite a bit in effort and cost. So I want to step back. Next slide, please. And just talk about where we're at in the process. We presented a draft feasibility study. It was last November. We held on to it and the new council is seated and we had the February workshop. So we're at the second box now of supplemental feasibility study information. In the box on the right, we're going to talk about softening, pressure filters, tower ground storage, and then also wells. After this is presented, staff will want to head into design. And then we do a 30, 60, 90. And at 30%, we flesh out more details. And then you can notice the box over to the left, architectural and aesthetics are important. And at each step, we update the financials. So that's a very methodical way to walk along and update your financials, try not to get any surprises at bidding, and make sure our TLAC and our rates are in line with what we expect. So again, we're at the supplemental feasibility study level. Next slide, please. So what we heard was a question on softening, and we can go into a lot of detail on treatment. So we came up with 7 options for additional scope. And they're in your memo and they're there on the list. I'd like to point out that really 3, 4, and 5 are together. If you wanted to know what this would do to a rate for a user, then we have to look at the annual costs in addition to T1. We'd have to look at 3, 4, and 5 to get down to a monthly cost for a user for some enhanced treatment. If we get into T6, that's really a preliminary design along with T7. So although there are 7 additional scopes presented, T1 is how much does it cost? What's the additional cost for treatment? Then we get into annual costs. Then we get into more design. So if you want to categorize them that way, that kind of breaks it out into blocks for the softening. Next slide. Storage. We discussed tower versus tank in the feasibility study, and we had a little bit of discussion at the workshop. So a ground storage tank, they both have advantages and disadvantages. So to flesh this out a little bit more, we'd look at a present worth analysis. And again, we were headed down the path of a tower, but to flesh out a little bit more on the ground storage, where does that break even at since you don't have to paint ground storage? We know it's going to cost a little bit more upfront, maybe a significant amount more, but we also know that over the long run, you probably will get your money back because you don't have to paint it. The inside work is the same. You clean it, you do annual inspections. So it's really about the outside work. It's about the aesthetics. It's about having a day's worth of storage up in the air, which is good during severe events, versus depending on generators and backup generators. And then we'd bring it all into a present worth analysis. So that'll clarify a little bit more tower and buried tank. Next slide, please. Controls. We heard about Florida, and they had a situation there where a chemical got out of hand and contaminated city system. So as I talked to controls engineers, that level of information can get really detailed. So we came up with, we would talk about SCADA, operational technology versus informational technology, and they are getting blended a little bit. If we want to, at this point, we could get into some city staff goal setting. What do you want the controls to do? Again, that can be or will be done at preliminary design, but it could be brought out in this scope. And then system layout is a design item. But again, we heard you, we wanted to bring this forward. And if you want to get into more detail at this level, we wanted to show you how you could do that. The last item is wells. And just in the big picture, we're always going to be looking for wells. We're going to have one well now, and we're fortunate to have Maple Grove as a backup supply. But eventually we're going to get wells 2 through 6, and you saw that being discussed with Van Blaricom. So we would recommend that you start looking at future well locations and just lay out the corridors a little bit in more detail and the spacing, 1,500, 2,000 feet away from each other. And so that is part of this scope. Next slide, please. So you can see the menu there, and it was in your memo on what we recommend, what are options you could add on, and then we also took a shot at what's deferred and as part of preliminary design. So with that, I'll open it up for questions or turn it back to Kevin.
Thanks, Kent.
Yeah,
Kevin,
thanks, Kent. The only other thing that I would just add before we open it up is that we did have, it's on the screen here, that we did have 125,000 allocated in the 2021 Waterfront budget to support water supply planning. So it really depends on how much information you guys want in either of these categories. So like I said, we tried to take a stab at what we thought was kind of a value-based assessment that we could kind of bring back to you. Certainly can be added to or subtracted if you felt it wasn't of value to helping you make a decision.
Okay. I'll open it up to the council here. If there's any, where are we on, what these options are, what we've discussed? Is there anything we want to add or remove or look at that is different from staff's recommendation there?
I'd like to consider T3 and T4. So those were the two different options for softening. The reason I suggest that we add those two is when we originally had the work session to discuss water, we talked about the idea of this being sort of a product of the city that we can really differentiate ourselves versus other cities. I think we threw out a random guess as to how many homes might be supplied by this in the near future, something around 1,000. And the cost of softening water for 1,000 homes is well over $1 million in capital costs. So I think it makes sense for us to consider it strongly. But to do that, we really want to understand what is the capital cost of doing it, what is the annual cost, and this gets us that information. So I'd like to see at a minimum T3 and T4 added. But I want to find out too, does that put us over or potentially going over your $125,000 total, given what else we have planned for the rest of the series of studies this year, Kevin?
I mean, I think those two items are $4,500 additional dollars between the two of them. Kent had mentioned if you take on that task, it might be helpful to consider a household cost, kind of normalize it to the homeowner. I don't know if that, I just wanted to re-raise that. I don't I don't think that would impact. I mean, I think our budget suits us well. It really depends on how much you want to analyze. I think when we would move forward to an actual design project, if the council wants to do that, then we would basically look at how that financed, and bonding would certainly be a component in a financial plan. So I think that 125 allows that we have options in the 125 for 2021.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, if I may ask.
Yeah, go ahead.
So Ken or Kevin, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I was under the impression the last time we talked about this that if we go down a softening route, we'd have to look at a gravity-fed filtration system versus a pressure tank. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So in doing, if we decided to not, we don't have to do T2, because if we say we're going with T3, 4, and 5, and we decide to go that way, we're committing to a gravity tank then, correct?
Yes, and at preliminary design, we'll take another look at gravity versus pressure. So
Okay.
they're not exclusive.
Okay. But we don't need to add T2 if we decide to go to the others.
Not at this time.
All right, thank you. That was my only question.
Just quickly to piggyback off of that, even if you didn't move forward with softening, like it's likely that a gravity system would allow more flexibility to expand and add softening. So if softening, even if that wasn't the immediate decision to jump to softening, it would be important for us to know kind of the value and goal for that, because that's likely one of the primary triggers of choosing gravity versus pressure, is the expandability component.
Gotcha. Okay. I kind of agree with Councilor Nichols about adding T3 and 4, and then I guess the recommendation would be if we do those to add 5 as well. But where's the rest of the council on that?
That's fine. We just don't have a cost estimate on T5.
And that's because we thought either, I don't know if I highlighted that to Brad or not, to be frank, but we thought either staff could do that, or we would work with our financial vendor or new finance person or whatever. We're kind of taking that out of engineering and putting it into a finance
Okay.
role. So that's why it's TBD. So, we could even add that on as a next step right after if you felt like it was viable to really refine, but that's why it's TBD. It would be coordinated outside of engineering for better value.
Okay.
Manoj or John, any input on the T3 and 4 in particular?
No comment.
I would support the analysis on it.
Okay. Then let's move on to the S. Let's see here, S1 and 2. Are we all on the same page there? Those are the only options. But we want to look into both of those as staff recommended.
Yes, I think so. It's prudent from an investment perspective to understand what's going to be the best long-term route. So I support spending a little upfront to potentially save a lot more down the road.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay. And then the last one would be W1, future well locations. Are we on the same page about that recommendation? Want to look into W2? That's it for wells. So the staff recommendation is just W1. Yep.
I'm
Yeah.
okay with the recommendation.
Yep, just W1.
The controls option, could you talk a little bit more about why that's considered an optional feature given the risks associated with cyber? Is it, are we not assuming that the controls would be online in a system like this and there wouldn't be that risk of foreign intervention?
Well,
I don't know. I'll jump in real quick and then Ken can get technical. I think the reason we're not recommending a controls is because on either approach, we're going to do controls and we can evaluate that later. So
Okay.
there's different level of controls, but that's really, we're going to have those same thoughts later. So it can get deferred to pre-design unless it was of great importance, but staff views that as a future topic. It's certainly very and extremely important, and it can have some price impacts certainly, but it's not something that we see as value added at this point because it would apply to whatever system we have. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's just it was classified as optional versus deferred, so that's why I kind of questioned it. So.
Yeah, the optional was something, deferred was like, I'm sorry, deferred was we really think it should be deferred. Optional is something that we think is to entertain as a conversation, was kind of the classification.
Okay. All right. Thank
we
you.
heard your concern. So if you just wanted to flesh it out a little bit more, we could do that.
Yeah. I think as long as it's something that we can, and it sounds like it is, we can evaluate later. Doesn't need to necessarily be part of it, part of this approval. So, okay. Are we all then on the same page for T1, T3, T4, S1, S2, and W1?
And I believe that totals 19,500.
Yes, that's what I have. So, yep, because the 4,500 for the T3 and 4. Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve tasks T1, T3, T4, S1, S2, and W1 as a supplemental analysis to the draft feasibility study for water treatment and tower design in the amount of $19,500.
Did you mention T5 as well?
I did not. Would we? I guess. With the
Does that have to be mentioned or no? Okay.
I think that we just, maybe talk offline if you want that now, or see what we bring back and add it. I don't think that needs now because we don't have a cost allocated to it. So maybe I don't.
Okay.
I'm out of line here, but maybe I have some sort of consensus on if you want Brad to bring it back.
Okay, I'll move the motion forward as the mayor mentioned.
Sounds good. Do we have a second?
Okay. Second that, Thomas.
Perfect. Roll call vote. McKee, aye. Bodema.
Aye.
Nichols.
Aye.
Schultz.
Aye.
Thomas.
Aye.
Alrighty, that carries. We will go on to new business. We have another public comment opportunity, and Jessica, if you could walk us through that, that'd be great.
Thank you, Mayor. Anyone who wishes to speak on items under new business, you can click raise your hand function if you're on a computer or a tablet. Otherwise, press *9 to raise your hand on a phone. Mayor, at this time, no one has raised their hand.
Okay, thank you. We'll go on to 10A, which is the full-time police officer job offer. And Matt is going to be presenting.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So the topic before you tonight is a job offer for a full-time police officer, and the candidate is Clayton Decker. So Clayton Decker's been with the city for a couple of years now. He started as a reserve officer with us, spent some time actually working in public works as well. He worked as a CSO in Robbinsdale before we hired him as a part-time police officer with us. You'll recall in September of 2020, he started as a short-term full-time officer for the city as we needed to get some more full-time help on board in short order, and he was already working as a part-time officer. He was one that applied and was successfully chosen for that position. So at the beginning of this year, we began a hiring process for our 3 vacant police officer positions. When that closed, we had 42 applicants. We interviewed 17 candidates in the first round, brought back 8 for second round interviews. And after the second round interviews, we distributed background packets to the top 4 candidates for the 3 positions. One of those top 4 was one of our own, Clay Decker, and he's, again, obviously working for us in a short-term full-time capacity now. Since he'd been through our processes, it was only an update needed for his background, and he's been through the other psychological and other testing portions of our police officer hiring processes. We did update that previous background, and we're recommending that staff grant us, or that the council grant staff authority to authorize a job offer for full-time police officer for him. We're also recommending a retroactive start date of September 19th, 2020, as that kind of aligns with when he actually did start working full-time for us. Although at that point it was a short-term full-time position. So it's really looking at recommending converting him into a long-term full-time police officer position. And I'm happy to answer any questions that the council might have.
Sounds good. Does anyone have any questions for Matt?
I don't have any questions. Can I comment?
Sure.
I've had personal dealings with Clay for a long time, and he grew up here. He lives here. I've gotten emails about him just out of the blue. I could go on for a long time, but I highly recommend we hire Clay. He's exactly what we need and what I would want as a police officer in our town.
Mayor, Thomas here.
Go ahead.
Again, it's just a comment. I've, as a reserve officer, I've worked with Clay. I think he's bright, he's brilliant. A lot of respect. So I just wanted to make sure I say that out loud.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask? Matt, so we have 3 vacancies and we had several applicants. Are any of those applicants still in the running for additional positions?
So right now we chose to background 4, including Clay. The other 3 applicants are still in the background process. Their backgrounds would take a lot longer because we hadn't previously completed one on them. So we're backgrounding essentially, if this is offered to Clay, we'd be backgrounding 3 more for 2 spots. And then what we would allow us to do is evaluate those 3 backgrounds and choose the 2 that we feel fit with, that are the best fit for our community.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we weren't starting over. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
I think my comment would be, I think it's tremendous that we have such a high quality candidate pool. And I think it speaks well, not only to Matt's leadership of the department, but the nature of the town and the interactions that the police officers have with the citizens are, I think, for the vast majority of the time, very positive. And we definitely want to maintain that culture. And I'm glad that here's that Clay will be able to do that for us. And I hope that we'll be able to find an excellent fit like him for the other 2 positions as well.
Thank you.
Well said. Yeah, it seems like a great fit for the department, for the city, for Clayton, so I'm all in favor of it. I'll entertain a motion to authorize staff to extend an employment offer to Clayton Decker for the position of a full-time police officer with a retroactive start date of September 19th, 2020.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
may I ask Matt a question, please?
Go ahead.
What are Officer Deck or potential Officer Decker's feelings about K9?
He's expressed interest in it. He said it's something that's been one of his career goals at some point in his career. He would like to be a K9 officer.
Okay. Thank you. That's all, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
So yeah, I will entertain that motion to authorize staff to offer to extend an employment offer to Clayton Decker for a full-time police officer position with a retroactive start date of September 19th, 2020.
So moved, Tom.
Pick one, and then the other person
Manoj.
second it. Perfect. Any further discussion?
May I just ask, what's the point of the retroactive start date?
Sure. So the point of the retroactive start date is it helps kind of align things. So he's currently subject to the stipulations of the labor agreement based on the nature of his position. So starting as a full-time officer would essentially basically, if we didn't do a retroactive start date, start him in a new position, which would then bump him back 6 months prior to what he's already basically been doing for the last 6 months. So it has implications as it relates mostly to the probationary period. There is a small, step increase that's at a 6-month step in the pay scale, but really it relates to a probationary period, which for our police officers is typically a year. And there's always still, up until they've successfully completed probation, there's still always the opportunity to extend probation if we feel we need to take a longer look. Clay's done an exceptional job so far to this point, so we don't have any concerns at this point. But those obviously it still would require completing the probationary period and the other stipulations. But for clerical reasons, it would be a lot cleaner to just continue his full-time employment as it started in September rather than try and restart a new employment period.
Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Okay. Anything else before we vote? Are we all good with the retroactive start date aspect of that? Okay. Roll call vote. McKee, aye. Bottoма.
Aye.
Nichols.
Aye.
Schultz.
Aye.
Thomas.
Aye.
That carries 5-0. All right.
Thank you.
Congratulations, Clay.
Thank you, Matt. Yeah, definitely. All righty. 10B, County Road Trail Feasibility Study. And Brad?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor and Council. And we're getting a jump on our action steps already. This item is related to one of our action steps from the council to complete a County Road Trails Corridor Feasibility Study. So we have a proposal in front of you. The cost is $30,500. It'll study corridors, determine crossings, look at right-of-way and utility impacts, as well as drainage, and do cost estimates, and finally have a final report for the council to view. The next slide, I believe, shows the corridors we're looking at. So County Road 101 from down at Hackamore up to County Road 10, picking up County Road 101 again at County Road 30 to our northern border. I will note that on that corridor 101, we're looking at the Corcoran side only, not the Maple Grove side. Keeping up in northeast, we'd be looking at the County Road 30 corridor. Coming down 116, we'd be looking at from City Hall down to the Medina border at Hackamore. And then County Road 10, starting at 101 and moving westward, really surrounding City Park. So we jump to County Road 50 on the south side and up to County Road 10 on the north side. So again, really studying this areas to understand the costs and design implications, as well as road corridor implications for where the trails could move forward. Next slide, please, Jessica. The goal would be to seek funding from Hennepin County first. I've had initial conversations with a couple staff there. It is in their plans as well. I do believe we could find some funding for this project. So really looking for an authorization for staff to seek funding and then complete the study with items 1 through 10 within the proposal. As noted in the staff report, this is park dedication eligible as it's planning for the parks and trails system. So that's where the city dollars would come from. So with that, happy to answer any questions you have.
Any questions for Brad?
Mr. Mayor?
Yep.
And this is a question for Brad too. Ken Gunther has his hand up. It's
Sure.
Is it appropriate for him to chime in here?
Sure.
Can you
I'm
grant
fine
him
with
the
that.
ability to
Yep.
chime in here?
I'm fine with that if we could unmute Ken.
Yeah. Yep. Ken, I've asked to unmute you.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry. I apologize to the council if I'm not up to speed on your public comment process, and I probably jumped in the wrong spot. But I just wanted to note and perhaps suggest a request from staff or ask staff whether they anticipate collaborating with Three Rivers Park District on their long-term trail corridor process. One of the things that I commented on the Three Rivers search process, public comment opportunity, was the fact that we've got two different governmental units looking at trail corridors within a quarter mile, parallel trail corridors existing within a quarter mile of one another. And it would be unfortunate if this was a case where we had two different branches of government collecting taxes out of the same set of pockets, building two major trails running parallel and within a quarter mile of one another. So I would just like to speak on behalf of some of the residents down in this part of town and suggest that if we can, we'd love to have a significant trail, but I'm not so sure we want to be paying for a couple of trails and facing all sorts of redundancy in that regard. That's my only, but I guess that was a statement in the form of a question, whether staff could include that consideration as they approach the county as a part of their feasibility funding request.
Gotcha. And Brad, maybe you could speak to that a little bit. I know in general, we're pretty aware of Three Rivers and trying to keep on top of what their plans are exactly. But do you have anything to speak to that about just the coordination that we'd be trying to do there?
Certainly. So this corridor is a little different in that the Three Rivers Parks Diamond Lake Regional Trail Corridor is really looking for an off-road experience away from the roads, through fields, neighborhoods, whatnot. These are what we consider on-trail corridors, even though there's likely a grass buffer of some sort between the roadway and the trail itself. So if you picture in Medina along 101 or 116 for that matter, something of that nature. So along the road, we call it on road because it follows the road, but with a buffer. The coordination from Three Rivers Park District certainly would take place. The highest level coordination would really be thinking about potential crossings that could incorporate into or with the Diamond Lake Regional Trail Corridor. So yeah, certainly that conversation would take place. It wouldn't supplant the Diamond Lake Regional Trail Corridor, but if we could coordinate, say, on an underpass or an overpass or a safe crossing, that's certainly an effort we'd be using as well.
Thanks, Brad. So I will open it up back to everyone if there's any other questions about this or where we are on this. Anyone?
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate Ken's comments. One thing to note that is the Three Rivers Park District Trail is dependent upon a lot of variables that's outside the city's control, going through multiple jurisdictions, which may, delay or ultimately stop that project from happening. This is totally within the control of the city of Corcoran. And I think the trail uses here would be different in that regard. And I'd personally be surprised if Three Rivers moves forward in the next 20 years. And this could be something we could move quicker on. So
yep.
I'm definitely in support of this and increasing accessibility and hopefully bringing people into our downtown region from the fringes of our city.
Yeah, well said. I think you're absolutely right about that. If the Three Rivers Trail were approved and everything was figured out today, it would be probably that long until it's actually there. And hopefully we'd be able to act much quicker than that with this. But also the different kind of uses in the on-road, off-road, I think is significant. But yeah.
May I also chime in on the tax comments?
Sure.
The Three Rivers is funded primarily in their major capital projects by legacy funding. So that's statewide sales tax dollars for the most part. So this is actually one of those rare opportunities that Corcoran has to pull in some outside revenue for amenities that isn't originating primarily from residents. So in that sense, at least I don't have a primary concern about double taxation for two redundant trail systems. This is a good opportunity for our own trail, if we get the opportunity to move forward on it, as well as if we hopefully get a Three Rivers trail, that would be an additional bonus.
Thanks, Jeremy. All right. Is there anything else with the actual proposal that we are we all good with what staff is recommending for the study, and for obviously for the authorizing them to seek funding from Hennepin County?
Yeah, do we need a motion or how does?
Yeah, I would think so.
Okay, I'll make a motion to move forward with the feasibility study.
Okay. Any further discussion?
Yep.
Okay. Roll call vote. McKee, aye. Bodema.
Aye.
Nichols.
Aye.
Schultz.
Aye.
Thomas.
Aye.
All right. Okay. Someone hopped on a phone there. Looks like my screen got a little thrown off. Apologize. And last we have 10C, Charter Commission appointment. And I will present this. Council member Nichols and I have spent the last week plus here meeting with a number of really qualified candidates. I've actually been really impressed with the group that that applied and that we met with. And due to that, and the fact that our Charter Commission is currently at 6 members, I am going to go ahead and make a motion that we recommend appointment of Jonathan Coots, Jerry Tucker, Randy Farian, Daniel Buckholtz, Scott Gilliard, David Hackinson, and Megan Hibbard to the Charter Commission for 4-year terms.
Second, Nichols.
Any discussion?
I would agree. This was a really impressive group of citizens. I see many of them are attentive tonight. They all have unique bits of experience and background and skills that I think will bring a lot of value to the Charter Commission. And it was really challenging faced with the process of trying to select just one person to add. And in light of the fact that we have so many qualified, highly capable people who are interested in serving the city, it seemed like a great opportunity for us to build a talent pipeline into other areas of city service. So my hope is that these 7 people will not stop at the Charter Commission, but will become more involved in more areas of the city as time goes by.
So we're recommending how many? 4 or 5?
7. So it'd bring the total to 13.
Okay, so I'm looking at the council packet online. It only says 4 applications in there, but I know staff sent some out.
Yeah, I believe Brad should have sent out the 3 that came out after the 10 o'clock on Friday when the packet was made.
Okay, so there's currently 6. We're recommending 7, so we would have 13.
Correct.
Okay.
Mayor?
Yeah.
I want to make a note here. So one of the things that really impressed me is that a lot of them are newer residents. And I vaguely remember back 3 years back when I came into the city that, there was this concept that maybe the newer residents are not getting involved in city process, and either they move in for the school district or for extended housing past Maple Grove. but to see that we're having such an engagement and an application process to get onto charter and hopefully the other commissions. I did note that some of them didn't, I would have preferred them saying charter, watershed, planning, parks and trails and go crazy on it. But just the fact that it's really encouraging to see this engagement. And if it's anything to go by, that was my first engagement with the city before moving on to the council. So maybe we have a future councilman or woman in this group. I'm also excited. I'm very excited with that. I just thought I'd make that note.
Yeah, definitely. The group in general, just a very diverse set of backgrounds and experience. We have people that have lived in Corcoran their whole life. We have some people that are relatively new to Corcoran, and every kind of professional and personal background you can imagine. I was blown away by the entire group. So,
Was there discussion with the individuals that listed multiple commissions about filling the void on the planning commission?
there was one, I believe, one candidate who had marked that they charter first, planning second, I believe.
Yeah.
And parks and trails third. And we did mention that, and Jeremy, correct me if I was wrong, that he would potentially be interested in the future, but now the time more
The time
would fit
commitment
with,
was an issue,
yeah,
I believe.
with
Yeah,
charter for now.
That applicant has a summer business running a mini golf operation and doesn't have the time available to spend doing planning at this point, but foresaw it as a possibility down the road.
Okay. Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
May I ask a question?
Sure, go ahead, John.
I consider these positions to be more important than ours, and like the sanctity of our city and the disillusion of our government is at stake with these positions. And so I just need some reassurance that you're prepared to state that every single person that applied, you're comfortable with them having the state of our city and our city government in their hands.
Yes.
And I'm prepared to go with what you say, but I just want to remind you that they are the people that end Corcoran if something goes wrong with the city government, with us.
Yep. No, that's a completely reasonable thing to ask, and I am very confident in each and every one of the people that applied here that we're recommending. I trust them 100%, and I'm, like I said, I was blown away by the quality of candidates and just the level of interest and the expertise that they're going to be bringing from a million different backgrounds. And yes, I completely trust them and have confidence in them, which is why I am recommending them.
I would add in also that given, we asked a lot of questions of these candidates, and one of the things we focused on is, what is the reason why you chose to live in Corcoran? And a number of them had answers like, well, I've been here my whole life, or I live close by and just moved in. But a dominant theme was the idea that they really value the balance between the rural environment that we've cherished in the city and balancing that desire for that culture with the eventuality of growth. And how do we maintain that rural feel and natural character even as we develop? And so I really feel as long as we can keep people involved in the city who have that value set, it's really going to help us maintain the continuity of that vision over time. So I really see this as an investment in the expansion of the talent pipeline for the city as a whole, across planning and parks and council and other things in the future. And I really look forward to
let me challenge you on that. It's a constitutional position. their feelings on the town and their feelings on the balance of rural and urban and their feelings on the future of Corcoran, to me, shouldn't be reflected in the position of the charter, which is to make sure that our town is constitutionally solvent and free of bias or things unconstitutional. They're not running for a position, they're running for a position that ensures that our town is constitutionally solvent, which is different and more important than a position on an issue. That's how I feel about it. And I just need to be assured that these people are hired to make sure that our town sustains constitutional positions, not political positions. It's a different role than any other role in our town.
Yep. Yeah.
Yes,
No.
If I may, Tom.
Go ahead.
Mayor.
Go ahead.
I completely agree with John on this one, right? This role is more about the balance and making sure that our town, city has, have our values, integrity, honesty, and essentially having the city having a secondary check on what John would end up doing, right? So I'm hoping when you and Jeremy made this recommendation after the interview process that, that's the basic benchmark. And it's obviously an add-on to see that, the vision that they're new residents who moved in and still have our vision. So that's always an add-on. And I'm going to trust your process and your recommendation on this one. I'm pretty sure, that's what I heard John say too, but I think the question is valid to ensure that we have that balance of people who have their heads screwed straight on, right? Lack of a better word.
No, absolutely. It's incredibly valid.
Thank you, Manoj.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with John. It's a nice question to ask, but it has no relevance in the play of the Charter Commission. The Charter Commission is to oversee, like John says, basically the constitution of the city of Corcoran. Since we're not a statutory city, they oversee the implementation of our charter, making sure that the council is adhering to the charter in everything we do.
Yep. No, I think we're all on the same page here. That, to me, some of that stuff was more icing on the cake. They all unquestionably meet the standard that I have the confidence in them that they will be able to perform that duty and that I trust them in that role. And that's why we're recommending them.
Is there a concern by anybody on the council to have a commission of 13 members? I know from my work in committees and business that the more people you have, the harder it is to make a decision and come to a consensus, because you've got too many people taking it in too many different directions. And I'm wondering if there's more of an optimal number, and we keep these other people in our thoughts as a vacancy would come forward.
I'm comfortable with 13, just looking around the state at other charter cities and their charter commissions and seeing the typical numbers. It's the requirements are 7 to 15, and I'd say the majority that I saw today that I was looking through most recently were in the 11 to 15 range. But obviously there's some that run on both ends of that. But I'm comfortable with 13 for the Charter Commission specifically. Yeah.
Alan, I would say that if I have a job open at my real job and I don't know, 7 people applied, I would not hire all 7 or whatever the number. Like,
yeah,
it concerns me that we would hire the exact number of people that apply, because that would, to me, it would imply that the filter isn't that good.
I would say that the difference there is that it wasn't just one position that you're hiring for. We wouldn't have recommended these if we didn't feel confident in all 7 of them. Since there is the room for 7 people to be brought on, and we're confident in all of them, that's why we selected it.
If you had to cut, could you cut down to 11?
Jeremy?
Let's go through the backgrounds of some of these people and why we decided to have them, because we've spoken in glowing general terms. Maybe we get into some of the specific attributes here.
Sure.
So first applicant.
Wait, is there, Jeremy, before you go into that, can we postpone the vote so we can, I don't want to go into this person by person. I'd kind of like us to, it's the first public discussion about the matter. Maybe we gave you the reins and said, go ahead and do it. We trust in you. Let's take 2 weeks and for ourselves, just investigate. Then we don't have to subject everybody to public scrutiny.
I guess I understand that concern a bit, but I mean, the names are as part of the record, and just from a logistical standpoint, if you're not here on the 8th, then we're getting pushed out to the 22nd. I'd rather just we've done the research and the interviews that we were going to do. I don't know what delaying it would gain us.
Well, I hire people for a living, and if somebody came to me and said there are 7 applications and all 7 are uber qualified and we should hire all 7, I would question the process. And so, although I trust you and think you make good decisions, to me, that's not a process when you end up with equal applications to job and you just pile on the job positions. That's not what we asked you to do. With all due respect, it's a cop-out. We didn't ask you to say, we're going to add 7 new positions to a body that has 6 positions right now.
Then you're free to vote.
And
no.
so to double the number of positions in a governmental body is not acceptable to me. I question that a lot. I would suggest I'll dial in on the 8th. We were expecting a little homework and a little filtering, then to end up with the same recommendation.
To imply that we didn't do a lot of homework.
You didn't, Tom. Otherwise, you would have come up and cut some people. Not every single person is qualified to do everything. I'm implying and I'm stating that you didn't. It's not an implication, it's a fact. Nobody comes to somebody and says all people are qualified for the position that they applied for.
Well,
Number one,
I'm sure
this is a
John.
volunteer position. It's not a job offer. Number 2, we spent over 2 hours talking to these people. They are passionate and committed citizens of this town. John, you yourself have said you wanted to see more people in this town getting involved in how it runs so it can be made better. I don't understand where this is coming from. Why are you resisting the idea that you advanced in the past, that you want citizens to be involved in this city? Why are you advocating for less involvement?
I'm advocating for more involvement. I'm advocating for a select people and cut some people. These are the most important people in our town who determine constitutionally whether this government exists. You don't take 7 applications that are the most important and pass them all. You say, hey, you should do this, you should do that. I don't even know these people. But you can't double the governmental body that dictates the outcome of our entire town and constitutionally what we do every day.
So,
If
John,
something goes wrong in our town and we filter no one who's in charge of who determines the future of Corcoran, it's a cop-out. It's a bad answer. I'm not
John,
accepting of it.
John, you are on a tangent right now. And this is Manoj, sorry. So you are on a tangent right now. So I am hearing three things. I was not there for the last meeting, so obviously I'm piecing it together based on the videos and the intentions on what was done from last meeting and then this meeting, right? So I hear you say that the council authorized Jeremy and Tom to look at applications that came in and take a decision on what needs to be done. I'm hearing you say that you trust the judgment of the people you recommended. So your judgment is to recommend Jeremy and Tom to go through the process. They went and they talked to the candidates from diverse backgrounds that Jeremy was willing to go through that you don't want to hear. You are making an assumption that none of them are constitutionally sound to protect our city because they are not in people in your circle or you know. You made a statement that it should be select. What you are doing,
I'm not saying I need to know
you said
them.
a select.
I don't
You
need
said that I don't even know them, right? And you also said that we should have select few. Who determines who's that select few? This is within the charter's count. These are people who have track records of doing their life well, I'm assuming. I'm going to trust Jeremy and Tom on this one, and I went through their CVs myself. So what I would do at this point in time, I don't think you're coming around to seeing what they are proposing. I would even right now, I would make a motion to make the vote because I don't want to just hear this one-sided charade from your end.
Fine. You can make a motion and vote.
We have a motion and a second.
I'm fine with that.
We already have a motion and a second.
Am I not allowed to comment because I didn't raise
I'd
my
like to
hand?
comment. I'd like to comment too.
Alan,
I
and
didn't
then
understand that you have to raise your hand.
that's fine. Ken, just give us 1 second. Alan, go ahead, and then Ken, you can speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I'd like to thank you for the time you did meet with these people. I'm sure you did spend a lot of time talking to them and whatnot. My only concern is I want people involved, but just because we can have 15 doesn't mean we have to have 15 people. So if we have 7 applicants, somebody's going to rise to the top of the 7. Someone's going to, in my opinion, let's take it in baby steps. Let's put these people, a few people on here, not expand the group so large that it's difficult for the group to function. And let's try to get some of these other people involved with like the planning commission or other things that come up. There's still other opportunities out here for people to work within the city to help the city. That's my opinion on it.
Okay. Ken, did you want to speak?
Yeah, I had anticipated commenting, just bringing maybe the perspective from the Charter Commission. And that was, I think, as I read back through the minutes and read the packet and the staff memo, it appeared that the fact that the Charter Commission, since its adoption in the late 80s, had never set within the charter a specified number for the commission itself, which might seem a little bit odd, but it had never really been a question or an issue before. And so my initial reaction when I saw that a number of applications had been submitted was that then maybe the Charter Commission should go back or get feedback input from the community, including the council, and identify an appropriate number of commissioners for that commission without sort of any preconception of what that number might be. It obviously has to fall between 7 and 15. It could be 9, it could be 11, it could be 13, 14, 12, whatever the number might be, but that would be a matter of discussion. And then there's a process that folks are probably familiar with for creating greater clarity as a part of the charter on how big the commission should be. Otherwise, we would have a tendency maybe to bounce back and forth between these numbers, which would be a little bit odd. the other thing I was curious about was in the packet that came out Friday, there were 4 applications, and I think all four of them were interested in the Charter Commission, and maybe one of them or 2 of them, I don't remember now, were interested in other commissions. I'm just wondering when the additional applications came in. They must have come in subsequent to.
Yes, I believe Brad sent them out to council at least. They came in, I think, 2 on Friday after the packet and 1 on Saturday or Sunday, I believe.
Okay. The final comment, and I think this is probably just a staff thing, but it would be a request because obviously the staff has to support the Charter Commission too, is that the application materials themselves don't really sort of clearly identify for the applicant what the appointment process entails. So as the staff and the council, the mayor certainly are familiar with, there are various paths to appointment, I guess is the best way to put it, to become a charter commissioner. But folks, if they want to come in and fill out an application, they don't really see that. And my guess is most of them don't really understand that. So while the commissioners who serve the city on the planning commission and the parks commission actually serve as sort of a subcommittee appointed by the city council in support of the city council, the charter commissioners are appointed to a different function. And there's been a lot of discussion of that. I think that the applicants for the charter commission should be able to understand that they can be recommended by the council, they can be recommended by the charter commission, they could be recommended by the petitioners who originally sought to have a charter commission created. And I would suggest that the way the statute is written, they can apply directly to the district court. They don't need an endorsement or recommendation from the commissioner, the council, or the petitioners. And that isn't evident on the application. And I think out of fairness, we probably owe it to the applicants to understand that. Because I think if I picked up the application now and looked at it, the impression I would have as an applicant, and perhaps somebody not familiar with city government, is that I have to get the approval of the city council in order to get appointed to the charter commission. That's strictly not true.
Right.
So those are just my general comments, suggestions for what they're worth.
Appreciate it.
Tom, can I make a comment?
Go ahead.
Look, Ken, thank you. Thanks for that clarity, right? I mean, and maybe I didn't articulate that really well. So I'm 100% on the same page with you, right? So that's one of the reasons why I came out a little aggressive on that one, is because it's not our job to say who can be on the charter. No, we look at candidates and we can recommend somebody saying, hey, this person might be good for our charter. But it's not our decision to decide who to put on the charter. It's the judge, right? And you called it out. And I went through that process back when I was put on, is that what we are doing here is we looked at candidates, we are saying, hey, these are good candidates. And that's all the motion today is, recommending them. The appointment is the judges. And for all the narrative we are running here saying, hey, you know what, I don't like this. We don't have a limit, and they could all apply to the judge directly and get appointed, right? So the argument that you are adding 7 people holds no water, because they could add more than that. They could add 9 people to it, right? So I'm glad you clarified that, because sometimes we lose perspective, and as we sit and vote, we think that we are making decisions. Rather, we're just recommending, and the judge will decide what they want to do at that point in time.
Yeah, to that point, even if we weren't confident in all of these people and we wanted to not select one of them, which is not the case for the record, but if we were to do that, they could still directly apply and do it. This is just saying that we recommend these candidates who are interested. They could, on their own, could apply anyway and get on at the discretion of the judge. But in terms of these 7 candidates that I specifically support in doing so, that's what the motion's about.
We'll call for a vote, Tom.
Sure.
I would like to see it.
Go ahead. Did Ellen freeze?
think
So
we lost it.
Let's wait a minute for him. We can hear you, I think.
Mr. Mayor, just while we're waiting for Alan, just to go along with the group, correct. So whatever the motion, if it's approved, it would be a letter sent to the judge with this candidates as recommended by the city council, and there's a process for the judge to appoint. So I just wanted to jump in while Alan was refreshing his screen there.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
yes.
I love it. Even when you got good internet, it isn't the best internet. I'd like to make a recommendation that we change these applications as well to include a description of the purpose of each of the commissions that people are applying for. Because when you read some of these, why do you want to serve? And they talk about the characteristics of the city and whatnot. To me, they're more geared to a planning commission role than a charter commission role. So you wonder at times, are these people know what they're actually, I love that they're volunteering, but do they know what they're volunteering for? Because what they might have in their mind is not what they're going to be doing. They're not going to be having the impact that they think they're having.
Right.
And that would be a letdown for people.
No, and I would 100% support tweaking our applications and maybe creating separate applications for the different commissions and specifically for charter commission. But that's why, because yes, I agree that some of the answers on just the application, when it's a general form, you are getting some that read more planning commission or parks and trails, whatever. That's why in the interview process, we pretty extensively went over kind of the role of the charter commission and explaining what it was. Most people came in with as much knowledge anyway, but I'm very confident that everyone after our interviews with them had a complete understanding, and that's again why we're in support of them, and we think they'd be great in that role.
Yeah, I trust you had good conversation, but I'd like to see the number a little bit smaller personally.
I understand. To your earlier point, I agree with what you're saying, Alan, about better communicating the purpose of the commissions and what they do. Coincidentally, one of the candidates that we are recommending is a public relations consultant who manages communication campaigns. So he would probably be helpful in defining that kind of communication strategy and how we would communicate it effectively. So as I mentioned before, this is a really talented group. I'm happy to go offline with anybody who wants to discuss their specific merits. They're all very skilled, and I think they're going to bring a lot to the table. So I would recommend all 7, which is in line with the current motion.
Okay. Then unless there's anything else to add, we will do a roll call vote. McKee, aye. Bottoма?
No.
Nichols?
Aye.
Schultz?
Nay.
Thomas?
Yes.
All right, that carries. Thank you. And then finally, we have just staff reports, nothing for active planning applications, pandemic response update, Brad and Matt.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Again, there's been a local uptick in COVID cases, but we're continuing to make great progress in Minnesota in vaccinations. Some of the statistics have our state leading the nation. We're up to almost 900,000 fully vaccinated in the state and about 1.5 million with at least 1 dose of the vaccine. So testing availability and turnaround with the results has been continuing to still improve. And right now I know they're anticipating that the governor will be announcing tomorrow that the availability of vaccinations for all Minnesotans over the age of 16 by the end of March. So some big changes on that front. And as far as locally in Corcoran, we're still continuing with our pandemic plan as far as city government is concerned. We're continuing to get our staff registered for vaccinations as they qualify, depending on what groups they fall in. And we're still moving forward, but I would say generally speaking, things are improving. And turn over to Brad for any other additions he might have.
Just a quick add, operationally, we continue to try to function as best we can, as regular as we can. Hours of operations are normal. Baseball season is going to go on, soccer season is going on. We're planning the summer cleanup day. We have preparedness plans for everything in place, but we're trying to normalize our operations for residents as much as possible. That's it.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask a question?
Yeah, of course.
Thank you. Matt, I'm hearing there's multiple ways that people are becoming eligible for vaccination or getting their vaccinations. Is there a state recommended or a recommended plan that's kind of a catch-all if people do not have a primary medical provider that they go through?
I know the state has a list, but I would say my recommendation is get on as many lists as you can, because I've seen different success through different avenues. So some of them are private lists through whether it's private drugstores or state lists, but I would say sign up for as many as you can, and that will increase the options. And certainly I'm willing to have conversations with anyone asking about what we've seen people be more successful versus others, but I'm also not going to publicly endorse one avenue over another.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Anything else?
Nothing for me. Thank you.
All righty. Then last thing on the agenda, the 2021 City Council upcoming schedule. Brad.
Thanks, Mayor and Council. I just closed it. It's going to be busy, I think, with Tavera and a few other items. We do have a work session before it as well. If you have any questions about it, let me know.
I do have a question. I believe the recreational vehicle ordinance was on for the 8th. Do we want to move that? I know John put a lot of work into that.
Thank you, Mayor.
Of course.
I think probably I'll need to explain some things.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Should we move that out tentatively for the 22nd?
I would push it to the 13th. The 22nd is packed.
13th. Does that work for you, John?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
Perfect.
you.
Then we will plan on that. And other than that, is there any other questions or concerns about the agenda other than that it's crazy busy?
Nope.
All righty. Then I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All right. McKee, aye. Bottoма,
Aye.
Nichols,
Abstain.
Schultz,
Aye.
Thomas.
Nay.
They should have voted
Again,
nay. Dang.
we made it real close. This is the second time you guys have done that. Thank you, everyone. Have a good one.
Thank you. Good
Thanks,
night.
guys.
Good night.